Well, hello there, Carolina faithful. Welcome to another edition of the Processing Blue podcast, where we have a new intro basically every single time. So we keep you on your toes or your paws or whatever it is that you want to reference to the Panthers. This is Panthers beat reporter Mike Kay. I'm joined by fellow Panthers writer Alex Zutlow. We are Processing Blue for you, and the Panthers are 0-2. No, I did not mean to make that rhyme. It just kind of worked out that way. They are one of 10 teams entering week 3 with an 0-2 record, the most since 2020 when there were 11 0-2 teams. So quite the company they keep, along with the reigning AFC champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. But you know who isn't 0-2? Just by proxy of not suiting up on Sundays? Alex Zutlow, how you doing?
There's an old lyric that comes to mind when you ask me how I'm doing. It's this right here. I'm just saying you could do better. Tell me, have you heard that lately? I'm just saying you can do better. And I'll start hating only if you make me.
Can I start hating? Because that was a very weird interlude. But I'm back from Arizona, where hope essentially died in the desert, at least for a few days.
Yeah.
Especially because the big news coming out of this game was not just the insult of losing in a comeback attempt, but the injuries that came with it. Robert Hunt suffered a torn biceps, and Austin Corbett suffered a MCL sprain, a pretty severe one. Both of those guys are heading towards IR. I've already reported over the last 24 hours the Panthers plan to poach a couple of players off opposing practice squads. You can kind of read about that on social media. We don't know how much they're going to really, contribute to all this. But yeah, man, this is a tough go for the offensive line. I mean, they did cultivate a pretty experienced group. 9 guys returned from last year. They also have Jarrett Kingston, a 10th guy on the practice squad, Brandon Walton, an 11th guy who was here last year, also on the practice squad. So they've got guys that if they need to immediately put players in position to back up this new starting group, which will include now Chandler Zavala at right guard and Cade Mays at center, they can do that. They're fine from a starting standpoint. Their depth is going to take a hit here. What's your biggest takeaway from these injuries with Cade Mays and Chandler Zavala also entering the starting lineup?
2 immediate things come to mind. The first is I didn't realize in just conversations with fans and with just like regular people who follow the Carolina Panthers how much they loved Robert Hunt. Like I knew that we loved him as like someone who gives really good quotes and who is always available in the locker room and stuff like this. But like I'm writing this week's mailbag and one fan asked, can Robert Hunt recover faster if I give him my bicep? Which is just like really selflessness, I think. And, there's a lot of positives to be brought out of all this in humanity. Kidding, obviously, because that transplant would not work. The thing that I am most curious about when we look at this offensive line now is why Brady Christensen in many ways wasn't really considered as an immediate guy to back up either of these 2 guys. At the center, I kind of understand. Obviously, Cade Mays and Austin Corbett were in a pretty feisty center competition this offseason. Austin ultimately won out, even though it was a really tight competition, as Dave Canales has said. So I kind of understand that there. Cade Mays also, in some ways, beat out Christensen last year for the starting center role when he got plucked from the New York Giants practice squad and came over to Carolina after Austin was hurt, and then he ended up starting at center. So I guess I understand that a little bit more. I think putting Chandler Zavala at that right guard spot to substitute for Robert Hunt is interesting. Obviously, he's a 4th-round draft pick in 2023. They have some like real stock still in this guy, but this one quite vexes me. I mean, reporters asked Dave Canales on Monday, what was the biggest benefit, or not even what was the biggest benefit. What was the biggest thought process behind keeping all 9 offensive linemen this year? And does these 2 injuries kind of validate the reasoning for keeping that depth chart? And the first thing Dave Canales says was like, yeah, keeping the 9 guys really hinged on getting Brady Christensen back because he's so versatile, because he can be so helpful. Well, if he's going to be so versatile and helpful, I'm a bit confused that when 2 offensive linemen go down, he's not starting rotation. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind. I'm sure that Chandler Zavala and Cade Mays will do well in the injured steads of the starters, but that's just an interesting thing to me, because every opportunity that Brady Christensen's had, it seems he's done pretty well.
I think so. For one, I think Brady Christensen is one of the top 5 offensive linemen remaining on this roster, right? Like, I think that we both agree on that. The only logic I could find is twofold. One, I agree with you about center. I think it would have been tough to put Brady at starting center after Cade Mays and Austin Corbett handled the competition all summer. And frankly, while I think Austin Corbett was probably picked for his intangibles, it was a really even competition, maybe even more so even than the kicker competition that we both were like, whatever. At right guard, the reason why this is me just projecting here. Brady's got 1 year left on his deal. They clearly like him more at tackle than guard. They don't want to move multiple positions in a game. So let's say he starts at right guard and then Moten or Iquanu go down. They would have to then rely on Josh Nijman because they probably wouldn't want to move Brady over. Chandler Zavala has 2 years left on his contract. He was a draft pick. I understand he wasn't a draft pick of Dan Morgan as GM, but Dan Morgan was the assistant GM when he was drafted. They need to figure out a way to salvage some of this 2023 draft class, especially as this is a year that's big for Bryce Young. I think Zavala is a better player when he has a week to prepare as opposed to when he is put into spot duty. I think the proof is in the pudding there. Like, his rookie year was terrible. Like, straight up terrible. Objectively terrible. But we did see flashes when he did have to fill in last year for injured guys. I will say, too, arguably the best game of Bryce Young's career occurred with Zavala at right guard and Cade Mays at center in that finale against Atlanta.
Inarguably the best game of his career.
Yeah, in a win. I think the Packers game is really good, too. But, yeah. I think, from their perspective, the versatility and long-term benefit kind of match up there. Now if Moten or Iquanu went down as opposed to Robert Hunt, I think Brady Christensen would be the starter. I think they viewed Yash as the better fit at left tackle just in case other injuries sprouted. I don't agree with that. I think kind of the handling of the week 1 left tackle position was confounding and not the right choice, and the results bared the fruit. And so, listen, man, like, this line's taking a big hit, and I think in order to help their depth, they need to give Zavala more playing time. Cade Mays obviously has to do well at center, and they have to have their most versatile Swiss Army knife offensive lineman as a main backup, because if he is a true sixth man, which he hasn't been to this point because Josh started last week 1, and Cade Mays and Chandler Zavala obviously came in, he's got to really be the anchor of this depth, because really right now, Josh Nijman and Brady Christensen are the depth. They're going to bring in, I'm trying to pronounce his name, Nick I'm assuming it's Samak, from Baltimore. They're signing him off the practice squad. He's a guy that they seemingly liked probably in the draft last year. But he's yet to play a game, and he's unfamiliar with the system. So they might have to bring up Jared Kingston, who I was a big fan of during the preseason. They might have to elevate him from the practice squad. They're going to have to figure this out. And so,
But Mike, I understand, but like, what's the point of having a good depth piece if you're not going to use them once injuries come?
I agree. I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's the only logic I can find in it.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
But regardless, the interior of this offensive line is gonna take a hit. And if you look at this past game against the Cardinals, yes, the Jonathan Gannon's defense did scheme up a whole bunch of really interesting blitzes, but there were just a couple conventional 4-man rushes that Bryce had no room to step up in the pocket and actually throw the ball down the field. And that was because of that interior line push. Now you don't have Robert Hunt, a Pro Bowler, being there. Now you don't have Austin Corbett, your starting center, there to kind of like anchor that interior line. How does that impact things? I don't think it spells positively for Bryce, who is finally finding a groove in the second half of last week's game.
So I'll say this: I don't think Robert Hunt played to his Pro Bowl level before he got hurt, and I definitely do not think Austin Corbett played to his norm over the first 2 games. I think he actually played relatively mediocre. So I have a lot of optimism about Cade Mays. We'll see about Zavala. But, you brought up Bryce. Let's kind of get into the Arizona game. And I don't want to dwell too much on it because I feel like this was a game that had its ups and downs. I wouldn't say Bryce totally took advantage of prevent coverage. They were sending blitzes. Jonathan Gannon schemed them up very, very well. I thought they were outcoached, and that impacted Bryce Young. For a second straight week, they give up 10 points to the opposing team off turnovers. This time, it was the first 2 possessions. Bryce Young has 5 turnovers in his first 5 quarters. They dug themselves a hole that they couldn't really climb out of. Yes, there were some promising moments when they scored 19 straight points. But for the most part, offensively, I struggle to understand this offense, what they're trying to accomplish, what they are doing that is creative. I'm not saying they're vanilla, but I don't kind of understand the sequencing of plays from play to play. I don't think the running game benefited from blocking, and I think that was part of the reason why it was so uneven. The pre-snap stuff that we honed in on last week was relatively improved, but I think overall this was still a sloppy performance by the offense. Before we get to the defense, what's your overall assessment of how this offense looked, including Bryce Young?
Yeah. Man, I don't even know where to begin. I think there are a couple positives. Teteroa McMillan had a really good day. That's important to start with. He looks like he is justifying his first round pick to the Panthers. Even when this offense is moribund, he is still shining, finding a way to be good, which is great. I think if you take the totality of Bryce Young's day, I think he actually ended up having another okay day. Yes, I know it's a lukewarm take isn't super popular in the world of podcasting, but like he went 35 of 55 for 328 yards. All those were career highs. Yes, he had the 2 turnovers, which were not good. So you look at that and you think, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Blah, blah, blah. Well, 33 of the last 34 play calls were Bryce Young dropbacks. That's incredible. Chuba Hubbard ran the ball 1 time in the last 34 plays of the game, which is obviously a factor of the team being down, but it's also like, you could work that in a bit more as a play caller, perhaps, if you're trying to establish this balance. Of course, they're down 27-3 at the beginning of the second half. So what exactly do you do? I don't know, but that's something to keep in mind. Bryce Young's best drive was the first drive of the second half. And he was just dipping and dunking the ball down the field, and that's when the team looked at its best, and that's when Bryce looked at his most confident. He was getting the ball out quick. He made 2 completions to Tommy Tremble on that drive, 2 to JT Sanders, 1 to Rico Dowdle, and then he found Hunter Renfrow in the end zone after Hunter Renfrow's defenders just like slipped and fell, and Hunter was wide open. So, like, I think that's when Bryce has been at his best, is when he can just like kind of surgically move the ball down the field without having to throw the ball deep. And that's kind of the opposite of what people were advocating for last year. They were advocating for him to throw the ball deeper down the field. They wanted that average depth of target to be closer to 10, 11 yards. That's when he was at his best statistically last year. In the Falcons game last year, he had over 10 yards average depth of target, like all these things. But he has proven that he feels most comfortable this year, at least according to the stats, when he is like throwing underneath and using his tight ends and using his running backs in the passing game. That's really what I got to say on this offense. Outside of that, you know, the pass protection wasn't great. Gannon got him a couple times when it comes to scheming up blitzes. Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle at times didn't know who they were supposed to block in the backfield, and when it came to the Josh Sweat fumble and ultimately touchdown by the Cardinals, Rico had to block 2 dudes in the A gap and had to choose one. And Josh Sweat was the guy that he kind of let go, and, you know, Josh forced his fumble. So like, the pass protection was an issue as well, but I mean, I don't really know what else to say about it. I mean, they did score 19 unanswered points or however many points it was. That's a positive. They ultimately didn't come up big on that final drive, which is not a good thing. It was just like such a strange mixed bag. And so, yeah, I don't really have a great conclusion about it. Do you have one, Mike?
I think that there is an issue. I want to choose my words carefully here. I think it's very hard for a head coach to be a play caller in this day and age. It is very hard. And while part of me is saying, look, you covered Nick Sirianni in 2021 when he handed play calling over to Shane Steichen, and now he's been to the playoffs 4 straight times, is 2-0 in his 5th year coming off a Super Bowl. Another part of me is like, I don't know that Shane Steichen exists on this coaching staff. And Brad Isaac, who's only called plays in the preseason, as fondly as you and I view Brad and as an up-and-comer in this league. So part of me feels like they're kind of in this like inflection point where it's like, does Dave need to be a CEO and focus on like the overarching picture? Because this team consistently looks outmatched and outcoached. And I don't necessarily think that's a great reflection on Canales or Ejiro Evero, who I think, and we'll get to this soon, I think he kind of reversed fortunes here. I think he did a lot of things right in this game against Arizona. And so part of me wonders, does Dave need to just really focus on the overall product? I don't know if that'll make the play calling better. Brad and him are locked at the hip, so it could be the same. But man, that conversation feels like it needs to happen and happen eventually. Like, I don't know. I mean, he shouldn't give up play calling this week, but I'm just saying, like, eventually that's going to need to be a conversation if this team continues to struggle. It's the one, ace in the hole that he has. They've already benched the quarterback once. You do it again, then it's done, right? But if you say, like, listen, I need to take a step back to view the overall product and make sure that, there is, like, I think when you're looking at the production of this group, you need to have it streamlined. And I think they have so many procedural issues that it feels like something's not being paid attention to. That's just a projection. I can't say that that's true. I'm not saying that's what's going on. But from the outside looking in, there's too many procedural issues here, especially for an offense that's been together for 2 years. I know there's a lot of new faces, Hunter Renfrow and T-Mac and Bryson Tremaine. I know that but like the offensive line was the same. And I mean, the tight ends were here and the running backs outside of Rico Dowdle were here. So like, or I mean, Chuba was here, right? So like the main characters were all here except for McMillan, who is the one guy who's thriving. So yeah, it's just interesting to me. But let's get on to the defense because I see all the tweets, I see all the messages, and I was extremely critical of Arrow last week. Like, no question about it. I do think they did some nice things this week. I don't think they deserve a report card that should be put on the fridge, but I do think there was a lot of improvement there. I think this defense with these two corners has played extremely well. They stopped the rushing streak of 200 rushing yards, and they trailed the entire game. Do you know how hard it is to keep a team under 100 rushing yards, especially when you have a mobile quarterback and, James Conner? James Conner ran through them last year and then got injured. He probably would have had 200 rushing yards had he not gotten injured and by himself. So this time around, they held him to 83 rushing yards. Granted, one of them was on the victory formation. They lost a yard on a victory formation. But, I think that was positive. I thought they tackled relatively well. Teams are still continuing to target the tight end or the safeties and the linebackers and coverage with tight ends. We knew that was going to happen. We said it would happen. It happened, right? Trey McBride's one of the top 5 tight ends in the league. You're going to have your lumps there. Evero did play his rookies more. I think it was a 3-snap uptick for Lathan Ransom, who actually made plays when he was in there. Nick Scorton was in there for, I think, an extra 5 plays. So he went from, I think, 18 to 23 snaps. Princely Uman Milan took advantage of his 13 snaps. He had the first sack of the season for the Panthers in a very limited pressure situation. I thought Derek Brown got his legs back under him in this game. I thought he impacted plays. Ashawn Robinson was pretty terrific. I thought Merrick had a better day. I mean, here, and I'll say this. We were extremely critical of Trevin Wallace. Trevin Wallace's film in week 1 was one of the worst linebacker films I in recent memory for me. He was much better in this game. He wasn't great, but he was much better. It seemed like he was reading and reacting well. Christian Roseboom, completely different story. They picked on him. It was like they were targeting him. And I think it's going to be a problem for this defense if they're consistently getting it seems like at least the first 2 weeks, opposing offenses have said, he's the weakest link and let's attack him in this way. And I think that's going to be problematic as they go along. They're bringing in a special teams linebacker from the Bengals practice squad who I don't want to butcher his name. I haven't heard it yet. I think eventually they need to bring up Chris Barnes. There's no way Chris Barnes could be worse in coverage than the 2 linebackers they have, and maybe he's just a third down guy, or they're playing a lot more dime linebacker with Trevon Merrick, who is also struggling as a pass defender. What was your overall takeaway from the defense?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of your points. The 2 things really stick out. The first one is that this defensive line is actually much improved from last year. I know their week 1 performance didn't necessarily show that, at least in the final stats, but they are. It got to the point last year where team would decide to run the ball and the line of scrimmage would immediately move back a couple yards, and then the linebackers would have to fill their run lanes perfectly in order to keep it to a 2 or 3 yard gain. And that's just not how you win football games. You win football games at the line of scrimmage. This year, the defensive line is kind of playing at the line of scrimmage, even sometimes getting a push, a pretty reasonable, good push into the backfield. So that's a positive. And that is ultimately why they did have a really good showing against the run in week 2. I wanted to just zone in a little bit on the defending the tight ends portion and defending the running backs portion out of the backfield when it comes to receiving. Trey McBride and Elijah Higgins combined for 8 catches for 123 yards. Some of that was schemed open, but some of that was not. There was one play on 3rd and 10 where the Panthers actually got a pretty good rush and made Kyler throw a pretty difficult pass to Trey McBride, and McBride just did a simple out route, beat Trayvon Merrick, and first down. Christian Roseboom, like you said, did get exposed a little bit in the pass game. Now, I don't exactly know how much of it was him just like trying to chase a play after it was already broken, because he was doing some QB spying, like a lot of QB spying. But you gotta imagine that some of it, at least, was his doing, like was a fault on his, whether it's a blown assignment or him just not being able to keep up with these guys. And then there was even one play where Elijah Higgins, it was a 1st and 20 after the Cardinals had a holding penalty, and Elijah Higgins was somehow getting guarded by Pat Jones. That ended up being a 22-yard reception. I don't even know how such a thing sort of happens.
Well, I'll tell you why, because this system believes in dropping back outside linebackers far more in coverage than most, and that's problematic.
But Jones had a really decent day rushing the passer too, which was just it was all kind of strange. The final thing I want to say about this is the second week in a row when the Panthers decided not to kick a 57-yard field goal, and it led to a game-defining touchdown. Now, I understand that there are drawbacks to a rookie kicker missing a really deep field goal, not just for the game itself, but also for the kicker's long-term confidence. And maybe these are just two statistical aberrations, and that if the defense did its job, then it would have turned out to be a good play. But that touchdown at the end of the first half for the Cardinals, effectively, outside of, like, before this magical onside kick happened, it effectively put the game away. So at some point, I don't know when the time is to let Ryan Fitzgerald kick that deep of a field goal, but it's yielded 2 touchdowns the other way, but that's just something to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of at the point right now where you're 0-2 and you have to be feisty and your expectations aren't super high, and you've got to kind of outwit or out gamble teams. I think this team plays very no, not conservative. I think they play tight, is what I would say. I think if I'm Dave Canales, I'm going in there and I say, hey, listen, we're the same guys that we've been. Most of us were here with that turnaround. Play loose. Let's make some plays. For instance, I can tell you for a fact that J.C. Horn played out of his coverage assignment with that pick on against the Jaguars. He called his own shot. I literally just got off the phone with somebody about it. You can read about it later on in the week. I think, like, this team needs to play smart. And that I think they have an athletic ability, but they just need to play smarter. That's just kind of what it is. And speaking of that, one, kudos, as you brought up, the onside kick. That was so well executed. Good for Damani Jones, showing off his ball skills.
Damani Richardson, yeah.
Or, well, what did I say? Damani Jones?
Yeah.
Oh. I was thinking, maybe I was like mixing him up with Damani Jones, who was a linebacker back in the day, because we were talking about Bengals linebacker. Anyway, whatever. Anyway,
hey, don't worry, I got you, bro. I got you.
Thanks for always looking out. I got to play smarter. Let's talk about Xavier Legette, because that is the
careful.
Yeah, I got to think this one through. They say, like, elephant in the room. I guess, just for practical purposes, it's like the horse that's in the room. You know what I mean? I guess that's
or you could just call it the curious case of Xavier Legette, which is what we decided on the rundown.
Yeah. But yeah. Which is fair, because in the curious case of Benjamin Button, spoiler alerts, a guy ages backwards, and it seems like Xavier Legette his development is taking a step backwards. He had a pretty good start to last season, developed into a pretty decent red zone threat. I think he had 4 touchdowns in his first 9 games. I think I've said it before. I think the flack for his first season really came after the Eagles game, and people latched onto that. there's nothing but negative to latch onto his first 2 games this season. Concentration issues, spacing issues. I don't really understand. Like, I brought this up 2 weeks ago. You can go back to Processing Blue. Remember when I said the thing that I'm most concerned about in the Adam Thielen trade is there will be a close game down the stretch or in the early going. And I said specifically, I was thinking about Arizona, where you're going to turn and you're going to say, man, they could have used Adam Thielen today. Did I not text you that after the final drive? Mm-hmm. That final drive was tailor-made for the trust between Adam Thielen and Bryce Young. Point blank, period. That's what it was. And instead, you're tossing up balls to Xavier Legette, who just doesn't seem to have any chemistry with the guy that he's been with for 18 months. I know people were frustrated about T-Mac not getting his shots in the game and I on that final drive, and that's valid. But, like, more importantly, Legette needs to be better than this. And he needs to play bigger. He needs to play smarter. It's Scott Fowler put out a column about benching him. I kind of somewhat said that as well. I think he needs a reset. I think he needs to kind of be put on notice. And I don't know if he's pressing because he sees T-Mac just like ball out. T-Mac's on pace for 1,428 yards as a rookie. Like, he looks the part. And, you know, I was somewhat critical of him as a prospect. He's shown some of the stuff that I've been critical of, like the concentration errors and not really being like a full-on possession receiver. But, man, I just, like, I don't know how you can't look at McMillan and say, like, what is Legette doing? And when you get targeted 8 times, now, to be fair to him, some of those targets were, like, far off. They were just assigned targets, right? But when you have 8 targets and you have -2 yards, congratulations. If you're watching this podcast, you had more receiving yards than Xavier Legette did in week 2. Unless you caught a pass for -3 yards. Like, that's fundamentally flawed, especially when you see Bryson Tremaine come out there and catch 3 passes for 48 yards like it's nothing. He made an incredible catch that you highlighted on social media where, frankly, it was off the mark by Bryce Young, but he bailed him out. And I think they really like Bryson Tremaine, like a lot. And I think you're going to see more of him as the weeks go on. And I think it's going to be at the cost of Xavier Legette, despite Tremaine being more of an X receiver. I think you could see them try to put McMillan out there at the Z position a little bit too. So I'm rambling a little bit, but, like, Alex, where are you at with Legette? I mean, what I would add is, before I say this, he had a glow up like we've never seen in an off season, like truly an unworthy glow up in my opinion. And now we're kind of seeing this. And I think if you're somebody from the outside looking in, you're saying, was he focused throughout the process? I talked to several people who swear that he was, and he worked hard, he worked diligent, and that he was, he's got a very smart football mind. I'm just not seeing that on the field. So where's the disconnect? What do you think, Alex?
As far as his focus, and I don't think that that's any issue. He is regularly talked about as one of the hardest working players in the locker room. We've talked about how, like, yes, his personality is wonderful. We were talking about how positive of a thing that was and how much the Carolina Panthers needed some sort of star power in the offseason and how great that was. So I don't put too much stock in translating his really fun offseason to his first 2 weeks. I think he's just struggling on the football field. A couple stats, because I am just kind of interested in this sort of thing. When I knew that we were going to talk about Xavier, I wanted to look things up. I want to see how you react to these stats, Mike. His average distance between his defender at the time of catch, 2.7 yards, which is pretty average for the league. His average targeted air yards, 9.2 yards. That again is pretty average. So it looks like he's getting these opportunities, right? His catch percentage, 26.67%. That is third worst in the league, in front of Brian Thomas out of Jacksonville and Andre Iosova out of Cincinnati. I think that tells the whole story. there was a play late in the game that ultimately yielded the drive yielded a touchdown a couple plays later, but there was an opportunity that Xavier Legette had, a jump ball that Bryce Young, I thought, placed really, really well, where Xavier, a 6'1", 221-pound receiver, this guy who drew comparisons to DK Metcalf, was going up against like a 5'10", 5'11" Cardinals defensive back and doesn't win. That's something that one day the Panthers hope that Xavier Legette will come down with. Did he do that a ton his rookie year? No. But that is something that he needs to do to take that next step. Another way he can take that next step, yards after catch. Right now he is minus 0.4 yards after catch per reception, which means that after he catches the ball this season, he's losing yardage. His expected yards after catch per reception is 2.7 yards. So he's like doing it to himself, according to these next-gen stats, which again paint a certain picture that these next-gen statistics numbers aren't NFL players, obviously, but I'm just saying how these things can come to life. His average yards after catch above reception is -3. Oh, well, that's just that 0.4 value plus 2 points. Well, whatever. Okay, I'm kind of losing myself here. But the point is like
he's not playing to his size. He's not playing to his size. That's what it is. He's not playing to his physical abilities. That's abundantly clear.
He's also losing yardage after he catches the ball, which is how does that happen?
Well, that's part of the thing, right? Like, he got compared, as much as he got compared to DK Metcalf, he also got compared to Deebo Samuel. And if you're not breaking tackles when you weigh 220 and you're going up against smaller DBs, like, what are you doing? And then you're getting bullied by smaller corners. Like, where's the physicality? Like, it just, like, you see the physicality at times from, I mean, McMillan plays to his size. Bryson Tremaine plays to his size. But, like, the appeal of Legette was that he had a speed-size mismatch built into him. And it's just like, where is that? I think some of those, he really thrives on slant and post routes. I don't understand why he's not targeted more on those, because it does seem like he has chemistry with Bryce in that regard. I'm kind of tired of seeing this whole, hey, he might be a gadget player thing. Like, he's not. He can't break tackles. He's not creating positive yards. What's the one thing I always talk about with Chuba Hubbard? And I know they play different positions. He never loses yards. Or if he does, he'll lose 1 yard and then gain it back with a big run. Like, I just, to me, when you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball with turnovers or lost yardage, you're not staying within sequence, you're not staying within rhythm, you are not helping your offense and you're not helping your defense either. And so far, Legette has been a net negative, both in yardage in week 2, but like production in general.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And I think Legette is somebody who does take mistakes personally. I do think he's a guy who holds himself accountable. I do think he's a really good dude and he wants to perform well. But in reality, sometimes you got to take guys a step back. If you can bench the quarterback after 2 weeks, you can certainly bench the Z receiver after 2 weeks. When you have David Moore, who's supposed to be this guy who knows the system extremely well, was not targeted in this past game. When you have Hunter Renfrow, the king of touchdowns, 2 in this one, kind of wild if you really think about it. When you have Jimmy Horn, who everybody wants to see from a speed threat, I don't know if he's ready for that yet, but I mean, what's Legette doing that's better? I mean, Jimmy Horn didn't suit up on Sunday. He had more receiving yards. That's my point. When you have somebody who is on the bench and who is not getting their opportunity and another guy squandering theirs, it's time to kind of reset things. That doesn't mean Legette should be traded. That doesn't mean Legette is done in Carolina. That doesn't mean that he is Jonathan Mingo. Something needs to be done here. There needs to be a level of accountability on both ends of the spectrum, from the player and the coach. I think Rob Moore is a pretty good position coach. He was obviously a Pro Bowl wide receiver. Like, it's time to make some decisions. People need to start feeling uncomfortable, even with the limited expectations that this team has.
So you brought up Jimmy Horn. I wanted to have a very brief conversation about this. If Jimmy Horn does get activated, you got to imagine that Xavier Legette. Somewhere the roster has to be taken. Someone on the roster has to be labeled inactive if Jimmy Horn's going to play. If the Panthers put Xavier Legette as inactive, I think that could shatter this dude's confidence. Like you can come back at me and say, well, Bryce Young was benched and look at him. His confidence was restored. It wasn't immediately. He did not play well in his first start against the Denver Broncos. When he came in limited work against the Bears, like, yeah, he did have a nice throw. The rest of the drive, he did have a nice throw to Miles Sanders. The rest of the drive, he was running away from the pocket, not trusting things, whatever. Like, this could do a lot of bad things for Legette's confidence if he doesn't play. If you are a wide receiver, you have the option. Like he could just be a reserve guy. He could just not be one of the starting three receivers, and you can find ways to get him touches early, or not even early. Just find a way to get him touches throughout the course of the game without him being a starting receiver. I think that's a fair trade. But this idea of just putting in Jimmy Horn now instead of Xavier and having Xavier be inactive, I don't know how productive that could be. This coaching staff believes in Xavier Legette, but if you watch him at all, sorry, 1 second, Mike. If he watched him at all his rookie year, you saw that he could be really good. Just point blank, he was really fast when he had the ball in the open field. He when schemed open, he can finish plays. But
here's what you just said. When schemed open, he was a first round pick. And maybe that wasn't.
He was the 32nd. I hear you, but he was the 32nd pick that
they traded up for. Here's the thing: if we're gonna hold guys like Trevin Wallace accountable, we also have to hold Xavier Legette accountable. Again, I'm not trying to kick a guy while he's down, but this is a performance-based business. At some point, this Panthers team has to actually grow up. And I maybe I'm being a little too harsh, but there are stakes here. There are stakes. This defensive coordinator has stakes. He wants to be a head coach. This head coach has stakes. He wants to be a play caller and a head coach. Some of these guys really need to step up. And here's the reason why you would say that Legette might not be active is he has no role on special teams. So if you make him the fourth or fifth wide receiver, it's the same criticism that you have for Jimmy Horn in how you were constructing the game day roster. Again, I'm not advocating that you necessarily inactivate him, but at some point a message needs to be sent. Because I'll tell you, other people on this team see when a guy is struggling. It's a fact. You know when your teammates are struggling, you know when a guy is not giving either a great performance or effort. I'm not saying that effort's an issue for Legette. That's not what I'm saying. But guys that are around players all the time know what's going on. And I mean that generally. If a guy is just in his own head, I'm sure they're trying to figure that out. I don't think Legette's Jonathan Mingo. I think that he can bounce back. I had really high hopes for him based on what he did in the summer. But at some point, if a guy's not producing, somebody else needs to. And I think they need to start having some serious, they have to have conversations. You had them going 8-9. I had them going 7-10. If they play at this rate, they are not going to do either of those things, and they might regress. And if they regress, again, other people are going to be held accountable for it. So I'm not saying do things to save your job. I'm saying do things to help the team win.
And you want to talk about how the Panthers could possibly win this weekend at home?
Yes. Okay. One, they need to protect Bryce Young. The Falcons' passing defense is terrific. They're getting pressure on the quarterback. They obviously spent the 2 first-round picks on Jalen Walker and James Pierce, your guys. Billy Bowman, who was a 4th-round pick, who I really liked, is balling out too. This is a good passing defense. Now, here's what's fun. They are kind of a pretty decent rushing defense in total rushing yards, but they're allowing 4.26 yards per carry. that sounds to me like you should jump aboard the Chuba train, right? Like, that's what they need to do. They need to protect and they need to run the ball efficiently. And I think Cade Mays can help in both regards. Offensively, they are kind of middling. I mean, I think they did a good job against them last year. With Mike Penix doing his thing, but I like, again, I think their offense is about just kind of having those two big corners up against the big wide receivers and hoping things work out. It's not like Kyle Pitts is lighting the world on fire, but if I were them, I would scheme him up to take advantage of Trevon Merrick and Nick Scott and Trevin Wallace and Christian Roseboom. What's your outlook on this matchup? Especially considering, like, they kind of need this one. They do. This is the home opener. They've already, they're already down 0-2. They've lost Herc Warden for a period of time. They've lost Austin Corbett and Robert Scott for the foreseeable future. Like, what's your take?
I'm just going to go straight into my prediction. I think Bijan Robinson is probably the best runner, pure runner in the NFL. Saquon Barkley said it. Michael Penix said it. And while the Panthers did have a really good showing against the run last week, I think that they kind of regressed to the mean this week. I have the Falcons winning 31-20 and the Panthers falling to 0-3. I chose the Panthers to win the first two games. The first one, I was really bamboozled in how they came out against the Jaguars. The second one, I actually thought the game was more even than it looked. Just two turnovers to begin the game just changed everything. This one, I think it's just going to be a really tough matchup. So I have the Falcons winning and spoiling the Panthers' home opener. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, this one's tough because the Panthers and Falcons historically always split this series. But I also feel like the Panthers play better in Atlanta against the Falcons than they do typically at home for some reason. I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be that big of a defensive struggle. I've got it 24-20 Falcons. I mean, that's tough when you start 0-3 and then you immediately go on the road to play New England and your next shot, they could pull it off against New England. They're kind of middling. When you look at the schedule and you're like, the Dolphins might be the first win, like, that's tough. Alas, I'm sorry to depress you guys, but on that note, Alex, wrap us up.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike K and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
I'll do my best. That's a wrap.